It was February 1992, and toy makers at the American International Toy Fair were feeling optimistic. Despite a recession the previous year, toy sales had seen a 5% rise. 1992, it seemed, was brimming with opportunity. And so toy companies put their best feet forward. Notable features at the fair included Vanna White fashion dolls, Mickey Mouse sandboxes, better formulated Play-Doh, an updated version of the Game of Life, and a travel-sized Etch-a-Sketch. A couple of toys raised eyebrows for having too heavy of themes. This included Tyco's Incredible Crash Dummies, toy versions of seatbelt test dummies that would scatter body parts upon crashing. Another controversial toy was Mattel's My Bundle Baby, which included a sack with a beating heart that kids could wear around their bellies. Open the sack and, surprise, there was a baby, or true to life, in rare cases, twins. The reigning toy champion, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These toys brought in $300 million in sales in 1991, but it was a decline from the $400 million they'd made in 1990. With fading interest in the Turtles, a Tyco communications consultant summed up the theme of the 1992 Toy Fair as such: boys are the byword. This meant that the fair was full of, quote, anything made to go fast, make noise, or kill aliens. Because of the perceived boy market, this was the year of some pretty big releases, like the American Gladiators by Mattel and the Zen Intergalactic Ninja Warriors from Just Toys. But elsewhere at the fair, another toy was making some noise. But not exactly your quintessential boy toy. It had a lot to say. Well, 270 things to say, to be exact. This was a toy meant to delight young girls with her optimism, style, and relatability.
I can't believe my ears. I can't believe my eyes. Every Teen Talk Barbie is a different surprise. Mine says, wanna have a pizza party?
Mine says,
You're my best
friend.
Listen.
Surprise, Teen Talk Barbie. What a surprise!
Teen Talk Barbie. This doll would go on to reign as queen of controversial toys, practically blowing the crash test dummies and My Baby bundle out of the waters of cultural memory. She would get burned in protest, denounced by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, condemned by the Dean of Mathematics and Astronomy at the University of Manitoba. She'd become the subject of a recall push by the American Association of University Women and the Canadian Mathematics Society. She would get parodied in her own Simpsons episode and sabotaged by a performing arts group that set hundreds of little girls up to receive new dolls that said,
Vengeance is mine.
Today we're going to talk about the controversy of Teen Talk Barbie and the public response. And we're going to try to answer the question, was she really that bad? First off, Teen Talk Barbie was something very novel at the time. There hadn't been a talking Barbie on the market since the early 70s, long before the girls of 1992 were born. According to the New York Times, every doll was programmed to say 4 phrases, which were randomly pulled from a bank of 270 possibilities. It's not clear how unique this would make each doll, as according to the Niagara Falls Review, there were only 80 different voice chips out there, but I wasn't able to find that information anywhere else. But if the dolls were programmed to get 1 out of 270 possible phrases at a time, this would make the odds of 2 dolls saying the exact same 4 phrases about 1 in 217 million. And just speaking on my experience as a former small child, the allure of getting such a unique doll would have certainly added to its appeal. So what were the things that she could possibly say?
It's so much fun to shop with
Party
you.
dresses are
Let's
fun.
make some new friends.
Pop quizzes are the worst. I love barbecue.
Let's ride horses along the beach. Let's have a dance contest. Tell me a funny joke.
I'll always be here to help. I'm going to be a veterinarian.
I was able to get my hands on my own. Mine says,
Let's go for a drive. Tonight's the school dance. I can't wait for summer. We make a great team.
how did they come up with these phrases? Focus groups, of course. With girls ages 5 to 12, they were asked what Barbie would say if she could talk. The girls came up with more than 1,000 different phrases and were asked to pick their 5 favorites each. And that's how they landed on the top 270 sentences that would find their way to Barbie's mouth. So you might be wondering how she racked up all these accolades in the Hall of Shame. Did she say something bad? What profanities could these 5 to 12-year-olds have voted on? Well, one of the options from the bank of 270 phrases, which would have left 1.5% of the dolls afflicted, was the controversial "math is hard." At least many newspapers from this era report that this was the phrase worthy of outcry. But that's not quite what she said. The phrase was actually,
Math class is tough. Math class is tough. Math class is tough.
those were all the clips I could find online of dolls saying this phrase. It's a pretty short compilation because, like I said, odds were under 2% that Barbie would get any one line in particular. And the odds of finding a doll who says this one now is even rarer because before the holiday shopping season really kicked off, Mattel pulled that specific phrase out of the bank of possible phrases as a means of course correction. But why course correction? You might still be wondering why this phrase, suggested by young girls themselves, was such a problem. The short answer, for now, is that people thought it promoted a harmful stereotype about girls and math, that it might discourage girls from pursuing the STEM fields.
Mighty discouraging words from a female role model.
But math class is tough, isn't it? Not just for girls, but for anyone? Well, the first thing we have to understand is that things were different back then. Times change. Let's talk cultural conditions. First, what did toy marketers say about girlhood? In December, I posted a video that took me 2 years to make. I analyzed almost 8,000 commercials on Nickelodeon and broke them into categories. I was trying to prove something about children's food advertising. It's this whole big thing. Please watch that one later. But anyway, this means that I've seen a lot of toy ads from the 90s. I made note of when toy and merchandise adverts had all-girl casts and when they had all boys. I want to take a deeper dive into all this commercial data in a future video, but for now, I'll just give you some first impressions. They're exactly what you would think they would be. Girl ads were very pink, they were very purple. They involved lots of snuggly toys and toys to care for, and these were interspersed pretty evenly among toys and products that emphasized physical appearance, i.e. stuff that was fashion, hair, or nails related. But not everything was mother or appearance centered. There were a few outlier toy commercials with all-girl casts. But I don't necessarily mean this in a good way.
It's Dream Phone, the electronic game with the talking phone. To win, call guys, get clues, figure out which guy really likes you.
Commercials with all-boy casts were generally for, well, anything made to go fast, make noise, or kill aliens. So this was it. This was what girlhood looked like, according to the TV. Now, if you saw my food video, some of the following will sound familiar. In the 90s, the FCC reported that kids were watching an average of 28 hours of television per week, totaling 18,000 hours before graduation and well surpassing the 13,000 hours we would have spent in school. So unless a kid was only watching PBS, they would have spent a lot of time on consuming commercials. But let's say they were watching Nickelodeon, which was certainly a rising star in 1992. After all, by about 1996, it would become the most watched cable channel nationwide. In the 90s, Nickelodeon viewers would have heard from the commercials a lot of reinforced ideas about what girls were collectively like and what boys were collectively like. I haven't analyzed Nickelodeon ads specifically from 1992, but according to my count of the ads I analyzed from a few years later, on average, 10.7% of the commercials featured toys or products with all-girl casts, and 9.4% of them had all-boy casts. Based on the ads I analyzed, if we assume there were 3-minute commercial breaks every 15 minutes, a kid born in 1993 who watched Nickelodeon the whole time they were in the network's target age demographic, and at the rates that the FCC was reporting in the 90s, would have seen about 9 minutes per day of toy commercials with all boy casts or all girl casts. In total, that's about 547 hours spent over the course of 10 years of childhood watching and hearing the message, "This is girlhood, this is boyhood." Now, my analysis is representative of someone born in 1993, which comes after the release of Teen Talk Barbie. But just a quick glance at the commercial breaks from the early 90s makes me inclined to believe that there may have been even more gendered toy ads in the early 90s. If a young child spends hundreds of hours hearing any kind of message again and again, that is going to get hardwired into their highly neuroplastic brains. Kid brains are constantly looking for associations and quick connections they can make about things so that the brain can access that information effortlessly later. This is why most experts would agree that kids don't have to try as hard as adults to learn a language. Adult brains are hardened. Kid brains are trying to harden. And so, if you tell a kid, this is what girls are like, this is what boys are like, and you repeat it over and over and over for, say, 547 hours, that's going to click. If a kid is experiencing gender dysphoria or questioning their gender identity, or even just doesn't like the stuff marketed to them, this was probably super disorienting. And if you'd like to speak on that experience, please do. But wait a second. Just because girl ads focused on cuddling or looking nice, which, yeah, might not exactly be prepping young girls for careers in astrophysics, in what world is this stuff intellectual? One of the main criticisms about the difference between boy versus girl marketed toys is that products with all-boy commercial casting are generally all about action, while products with all-girl casts encourage passivity. When I read up on this, I couldn't help but think of one ad in particular. Sit and Style Barbie. Here's what she does. You style her, and then she sits.
Sit and style Barbie. She's sitting pretty. Sit and style Barbie.
So it's not necessarily that girl toys are being criticized as anti-intellectual. They're criticized because they perhaps don't encourage girls to play or interact actively enough in this world to develop the leadership skills and initiative that it will take to pave their own futures. But this time, the girl toy in question was seen as blatantly anti-intellectual, on top of being too passive. But I think it's important to point out that not everybody thought this doll was anti-intellectual.
I cannot imagine a girl with a potential career at NASA throwing it all away over what a doll says.
And it's my suspicion that even less people think so today. When I was researching this video, I found a handful of funny opinion pieces on the topic. Until the 1994 Simpsons episode, which poked fun at the doll, usually the humor was reserved for the side that thought perhaps this doll was catching a little too much criticism. Like this one by Al Seischerman from the Minneapolis St. Paul Star-Tribune, in which he jests that the doll should probably say things like, "Art is an act of attempted justice, and its responsible exercise stirs the ultimate issues when it cannot decide them." And then there's this one, which uses humor, but honestly overall feels a lot more mean-spirited. They ask, what's the worst thing that could happen if a girl hears this? They'll say, no, Barbie, say it isn't so. Mommy, come quick. I'm having a gender-related confidence crisis. I'll never be able to do long division again. So there were definitely people who didn't see the big deal about this doll and didn't understand the backlash. And then there's people of the modern day. I decided to browse the doll community on Reddit, which is super fun, and I sorted by top posts of all time. And it didn't take long to find this. They hated Barbie for she spoke the truth. The original poster said that this was one of the stupidest controversies of all time, and that maybe a child struggling with math might actually find it encouraging that someone who succeeded at every career in the book also struggled with math class. I actually was able to get in touch with the original poster, who made a Tumblr post about how this doll would have been a great role model for her due to her own math learning disorder. Luna the Waffle Lord on Tumblr says that she was known as the smart kid and therefore felt pressure to be good at all subjects, including math. She says that this Barbie actually would have been a great role model for her, as Barbie was supposed to be this perfect girl who could be a doctor, a scientist, an astronaut, and that it would have been nice to know that, well, actually, even this perfect, smart girl who can do anything struggles with math. And this is where I can't help but jump in. I don't know. I think I was kind of on this side of the fence before I started making this video. It's not that I thought a doll saying math class is tough was inherently good. I just think the whole thing reminds me of other negative experiences that girls tend to have. When Mattel found themselves in a PR crisis because of this doll, a spokeswoman said, quote, "If Barbie talks in the future, we will take into account these concerns." And I don't know, hearing that kind of hit a nerve for me. Here's what I mean. If Barbie has one controversial but highly interpretable phrase in a bank of 269 other phrases that don't make people bat an eye, what are we doing scrutinizing and hyper-focusing on this one phrase that the vast majority of the dolls don't even say? 1 out of 270 phrases is 0.36% of the phrases. I just can't help but feel like laser focusing on one tiny thing a doll says reminds me of the way that we have a history of scrutinizing women and girls over one little thing they might have said or done, even if they hadn't meant harm. If Barbie talks in the future, they said, it just reminds me of how sometimes it feels like the golden rule for girls is, if you don't have anything perfect to say, don't say anything at all. Based on my lived experience, it just feels like we scrutinize and shame women and girls over small perceived missteps without even looking at the other 99.6% of things that she does that might even be good. It just feels like there's more rules for girls, and this reminds me of that. And I just think it's interesting how at the beginning of the video, we talked about the open market toy makers wanted to tap into, boy stuff. And one prominent feature of boy stuff, anything that makes noise. And while the crash test dummies were scrutinized, most boy toys aren't scrutinized for the actual things they say or the actual noises they make. If noise is one of the top 3 features someone thinks of to mention when describing boy toys, that surely means that there are lots and lots of boy-oriented toys out there making noise. The first talking Barbie in 2 decades comes out, and it feels like she's put under a bit of a microscope.
It all has to do with what Barbie thinks about math class.
I don't want to stray too far, but I want to talk about having a daughter, specifically a baby daughter. Mine isn't quite 2 yet, almost, but not quite. Some other mothers of daughters who I know feel a lot of pressure about dressing their girls. Maybe mothers of boys might feel this too, but I know girl moms who feel self-conscious about dressing their girls in pink. One of my friends with a baby girl of her own told me a story about how another mom in a mom's group complimented all the girl moms for not forcing their baby girls to wear pink. And my friend said she was very nervous the whole rest of the meeting because the spare outfit in the diaper bag was a pink jumpsuit. On the one hand, I get it. This 2011 article from The Guardian says, quote, "Pink helps to lure girls away from more active toys and games that encourage the development of spatial and analytical skills." And one thing I think any parent would agree on is that no one wants to give their child a toy that's going to hold them back through harmful stereotypes or in any other kind of way. But whether or not parents wish to hold their kids back isn't the heart of the debate here. The real question is whether the delivery of girl toys actually translates to harm. But at the same time, pink is a color. We see it in nature. It's not owned by malice. It's not owned by stereotype. And you know what else? I love pink. But here's the detail of my friend's story that I was really interested in. This other mom's baby boy was wearing blue. And this story just feels like a reminder that girls are never too young for this social norm to get thrust upon them. You have more rules to follow than boys. And I think that's why I want to rush to Barbie's defense here. I want to say, girls don't have to like this toy. No offense. But don't say that they can't. But of course, there's still lots of details on Teen Talk Barbie that we're missing. As Luna the Waffle Lord actually points out, there's another side of the story. And she says that when she learned about how things were at the time, she began to have more understanding toward this other side. Let's hear the other side of this. Perhaps the other side of the aisle is best summed up like this.
There's no question that there is a stereotype that exists for young girls, which is that math is hard.
Teen Talk Barbie was born the same year that I was, and so I don't remember the exact cultural conditions back then. I suppose I do remember this being a stereotype in the later half of the 90s, but I also remember it being highly disputed and debated. But here's what I could find about what was going on in the early 90s. In February 1992, in what seems to be just days before the American International Toy Fair, the American Association of University Women, or AAUW, released a report about some of the inequalities between boys' and girls' education. It was called How Schools Shortchange Girls. Here are some key details. Number 1, researchers found that boys call out answers 8 times more often than girls, and that the typical reaction is for the teacher to listen and comment back on boy remarks, but that the typical reaction to a girl calling out was for the teacher to say, "Please raise your hand if you want to speak." Number 2, from a young age, boys always had more hands-on experience with scientific tools. For example, by 3rd grade, 51% of boys had used a microscope and only 37% of girls. Number 3, they reported on studies that found that math confidence is more closely linked to performance than any other factor. Girls demonstrated lower math confidence than boys, and this gap widened with age. By middle school, girls' decline in math confidence also correlated with a drop in achievement. Number 4, girls who see math as, quote, something that men do worse in math than girls who disagree. Number 5, they said that reports of girls facing gender-based harassment in school and on school buses were increasing at alarming rates, and that these behaviors were surely spreading the message that girls weren't worthy of respect in schools. The entire report is a 240-page book, but I'm getting these key details by typing math and girls into the newspapers.com archive for the year 1992 and getting hundreds of hits. The findings of the How Schools Shortchange Girls report really were all over the news. People were catching on that girls weren't getting the encouragement they clearly needed in the classroom, especially when it came to math, and people were also opening up their minds to finding solutions. And then
there goes Barbie.
So here are some of the ways that people reacted to a doll who came out just moments after the AAUW had just released this report full of big revelations about girls and math. Let's start with the American Association of University Women themselves. Sharon Schuster, the association's president, called on Mattel to issue a recall, reminding them that preteen girls most likely to play with the doll were the ones at highest risk for losing confidence in their math ability. Second, though it took 2 years to brainstorm, put together, and release, The Simpsons parodied the doll in a season 5 episode, Lisa vs. Malibu Stacy. In this one, Barbie is totally satirized, spouting phrases like, "Don't ask me, I'm just a girl," and "Thinking too much gives you wrinkles." It's actually a pretty good social commentary on how corporations market those passive, limiting messages to girls, as we talked about before. It's also got a compelling little plot where Lisa teams up with Stacy's original creator, Stacy Lovell, to create a better doll for girls. Side note, Stacy Lovell is played by Kathleen Turner, aka Chandler's dad on Friends. Next, there was the public rebuke of the doll by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, or NCTM, a very influential organization which represented 92,000 teachers at the time. One of their goals was promising equity in math education, and they were obviously quite up to speed on all the information in the recent AAUW report. According to a few different websites, the NCTM's president, Mary Lindqvist, made public criticisms on behalf of the organization, though direct quotes don't seem to be well documented. Another critique came from the Dean of Mathematics and Astronomy at the University of Manitoba. Lynn Batten said she's experienced discrimination in her field, stating that some people have a problem with a female mathematician. She also reminded the world that female mathematicians used to have to publish their work under male names. Like the AAUW, the Canadian Mathematics Society also urged a full recall. Then there were the public protests. Perhaps the most high-profile example came from performing arts group, the Barbie Liberation Organization. The group said they had, quote, operatives all over the country who were buying Teen Talk Barbie dolls and swapping out their voice boxes with those of G.I. Joe. They wanted to draw attention to gender stereotypes and claimed to have switched the voices of 300 dolls in the 1993 holiday season. It's tough to confirm this number, but for Zachariah Zalen of San Diego, perhaps all that mattered to him was his disappointment in getting a G.I. Joe that asked him if he wanted to go shopping. While it's tough to confirm what was fact and what was fiction for the Barbie Liberation Organization, I'm at least happy that a talking toy made with boys in mind was finally brought to the conversation about gender stereotypes being a problem. And then there were more local protests, many of which we probably can't know about since they didn't make national news. But one such protest I was able to find was the barbecue at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. At this event, protesters literally burned Barbie dolls on a grill. There's not a lot of information out there about this event, but I got some very special insight.
I'm Karen Hinheti. I tell my students, or I've told my students in the past, that Hinheti rhymes with confetti. I have been in education for many, many years, probably about 26, 27. There were a number of us in the English department at UNL who just felt the way Barbie had been portrayed and the things that had come out with Barbie, with the math, was just a real detriment to girls, was the wrong message that, wanted to be sent. And we were all frustrated and talking about that. There was the planned march for Take Back the Night, and we participated in that. And then we decided to have the barbecue on the front area at UNL there. But yeah, math is hard. There's no disputing that. It is the fact that this phrase, this idea is coming out of a toy that is beloved by millions around the globe, and that young girls play with it. And we know that in the elementary school years, girls equal boys in math. But when they start playing with Barbie, which is upper elementary school and going into middle school, and then that starts to taper off with playing with Barbie. But at the age that they're really invested in Barbie, that's then the age that they're getting suddenly this message that math is really hard. And that's also where we see the drop off in the math scores for girls.
As Karen has worked in education for so long, I wasn't surprised that she knew this information about girls and math. But she did say things that really surprised me. It shouldn't have been shocking, but just like how the early 90s was a different time for the conversation about girls and math, it was also a different time overall for conversation in general.
Something that is so subconscious, but so pervasive, I think needs to be probed and questioned. And and talked about, because this can influence people's perceptions and girls' perceptions about math.
To me, it seems like it's more about starting a kind of conversation.
I used the word conversation and you did. I don't believe that at that time that was the type of phrase that we used, that we need to have a conversation about something, or let's have a conversation. Like, that wasn't in the syntax of things so much. The way people received, let alone presented information, was very different. Like, we get a lot of email notices and flyers and adverts now, and that just wasn't the case then. So having something in the newspaper was a big deal. Doing something visually, people were out more, and that has only, even more recently with COVID and people staying at home, it was such a different feel. It was a vibrancy on campuses. So you would be out seeing and observing and taking in the world in a different way than people take in information in the world today. I also think, part of it too is, along with some of the stereotypes about women being nice and being beautiful, to suddenly have a group of women standing around and setting fire to something. I mean, that's a very violent, volatile act in itself, and doing that to something that is pretty or cutesy or a toy, that's where we wanted to sort of make that difference. I don't know that it would have that kind of impact today.
Maybe the idea was get people thinking for themselves instead of just telling them, here's the problem, here's the problem. Would you say that's correct?
That's my impression, or feeling at this point, yes.
Not long after that, I realized another glaring difference between how we think of social demonstration today versus how things may have been in the early 90s. Do you feel like it had any lasting impacts that you can remember? Do you think that it maybe changed people's views? Did you notice any difference maybe with people you knew who would bring it up later, or do you think people were more sensitive to what it was the group was trying to demonstrate?
I don't know that I can really speak to a larger group impact. I'm not sure that this kind of activity is designed to really do that kind of thing. At the time and thereafter, it has an impact on those of us who participated, and just really helped solidify for us that we were trying to make a difference in awareness about gender roles, and how these are topics that are important. So these are those kinds of things that I think you do. Sometimes you do them because you're interested, but also as by doing it, it cements or solidifies the importance to you that keeps you moving.
I feel like maybe people my age, when they want to kind of share something important, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. Like, what difference did this make? How can I measure if this was a success? But I think we maybe lose something by forgetting that a lot of times it is just to solidify for ourselves that this is important. And like you said, it keeps you moving. Sometimes getting involved in a protest or social movement can be about getting and keeping in touch with your own core values. And talking to Karen changed everything for me. And I think I have my answer now to our original question. So, was Teen Talk Barbie that bad? The answer is, I don't want to answer that question. I feel like finding and landing on an exact answer to whether or not Teen Talk Barbie was good or was bad is not a good idea. Karen said, "Let's have a conversation" wasn't really in the social vernacular back then, and that neither was information overload. And I mean, think about all the information you get in a day. When Teen Talk Barbie came out, we didn't have text after text and post after post and update after update of information coming at us from all directions. So stuff like burning Barbies on a grill was effective because it gave onlookers something to think about, something that would stick with them. I'd guess that this would have been the most memorable thing observers of the protest saw that day. And for me right now on this day, I've got about a 10-way tie on my hands for craziest, most memorable things I've seen after 3 minutes of scrolling Reddit. With this information overload, I feel compelled to talk to my friends and my family, to have a conversation, to leave these conversations with some kind of an answer to process everything, because I can't just leave 10 shocking pieces of information in a gray area. I need answers. What do we do? How should I interpret this? But in the 90s, it seems like people were more comfortable sitting with uncertainty. Not because the questions were easier, but maybe because they came one at a time, or at least slower. You weren't being hit with global tragedies, political scandals, and existential debates every time you opened your phone because, well, there were no smartphones. There was more space to think, more time to form perspective. Today we have a constant flood of information, the task of evaluating and thinking critically about every piece of information, and once we think we've figured out what's real and what's not, we need to work through the best reasons to take the stances that we do. No wonder we crave black and white answers. It feels like the only way to stay afloat. That's why it worked so well to swap the toys' voice boxes and to burn a doll on a grill. You trusted that people would see it and think it over, that they had time to process tough questions. And if you could be creative enough to get your tough questions on someone's mind, you could get them to ponder those questions perhaps for years to come. I feel like my original goal of trying to answer, good or bad, is how people my age in this point of history need to approach everything. Answer the question so you can tick it off the to-do list of difficult topics you need to conquer. Earlier, I mentioned that the fact that a girl toy has continually reigned queen of controversial toys for decades feels indicative of a problem that we're more critical of girls than boys. That our scrutiny over the things Barbie said feels like a reminder of society's default mode for dissecting women's behavior. And I still think this is true. But this is going to remain true whether I commit to the yes or no answer that we crave today. But here's what also made the Barbie Cube memorable. It didn't give answers, it just left people thinking. So I think I want to let the controversy remain, let the debate ensue. I love nostalgia, obviously, and I'm nostalgic for Barbie and American Girl and Nickelodeon and embarrassingly The Simple Life with Paris Hilton. But I think I am also nostalgic for a time when I didn't feel such pressure to fully process dozens of difficult questions every day. And no, things weren't perfect back then either. I mean, look at that report about girls in math. But the fact that this debate remains nuanced and unanswered feels like a good remnant of the past that we can hold on to. I think Teen Talk Barbie was good. I think Teen Talk Barbie was bad. I think I need more time to take it all in, and that's okay with me. Thank you for being here. And a special thanks to Karen, Luna the Waffle Lord, and Eric from the archive team at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. If you enjoyed this video and want to help the channel at absolutely no cost, please do subscribe, share, and comment, as all of this goes a long way. We've got more coming soon, and we've also got a fun community getting started here on this channel. I have loved talking to each and every one of you, so please do write in the comments.
We make a great team.
Thanks again, everyone, and I hope to see you again soon.